Okay, good afternoon, everyone, or good morning, depending on where you are watching us from. I'm Steve Seepersod, coming to you live from the campus of Binghamton University. I'm part of the communications and marketing staff here, working in close partnership with the Alumni Association. And on behalf of the Alumni Association, I'd like to offer a hearty welcome to today's program. Did you see what they said? Yeah, that's not said incorrectly. Did you see what they said? Talking about body language, something that is quite the fascinating topic, and have a great turnout of alumni who have registered for today's webinar. So we're very eager to dive into today's program. This is part of the Binghamton Learning Network webinar series, one of many lifelong learning offerings we have for alumni here at the university. So check us out on our website, binghamton.edu/alumni. We have a movie club, we have a book club, we have tier talks, we have all sorts of interesting things because we know that your love of learning never really goes away. So binghamton.edu/alumni is the place to be to check that out. Now let's talk a little bit about how today's program will work. So we will be happy to take your questions during the presentation today. So send those questions in whenever you want. My email is up there on the screen, sseepers@binghamton.edu. And we'll mix these questions in during the program as time and space permit. And then we'll have time for questions at the end of the program. So be sure to keep those questions coming along to us. And we're sure you're going to enjoy today's program. If you are watching us on Facebook, on the Alumni Association's Facebook page, welcome. Glad to have you there as well. Type in your questions as comments, and we will get those into the mix as well. And let's bring up our featured presenter for today from the class of 1972. Barbara Chatzkel comes to us from Arizona, and she's a business consultant and an expert on body language. She is president of the New River Group for more than 30 years. She's been helping organizations improve and achieve excellence. She's an experienced executive and team business coach, specializing in organizational transition and change. I normally don't like to read stuff because it's not as interesting as looking right into the camera and saying it, but quite a lot there. I want to get it right. And Barbara, we're so excited to have you today. It's been a while since we started to put this program together, and we're finally here and ready to dive in, and it should be a fun hour.
Thanks so much, Steve, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to virtually go back to Binghamton. It's been a long time, and I'm sure I would need some help navigating the campus, but it's wonderful just to interact with the folks and to see the photos. People, did you see what that person said? As Steve said, it feels like it's not grammatically correct, but it is, because what we want to talk about today is that body language is essential for successful verbal communication. Not only do you hear what the person is saying, but your eyes take it in and form their own view of what's going on. So let's take a walk through body language and see how you can start becoming a body language pro. Next. Okay, I've heard the questions. So I have a BA in comparative literature. Why do I need to care about body language? Throughout this presentation, you will see these green boxes with reflection ideas. If the world were perfect, we would be sitting opposite each other and we could ask these questions. But what I'd like you to be, what I offer to you is that after this session, you go back and think of some of these things. So body language isn't used only at work. As a matter of fact, when I search body language books, more than 50% of the books are on the body language of getting a date, finding a mate, or investigating a mate. That is not what we're talking about here. We are talking about business body language and helping you be as effective and expressive as possible. Next. So why I care about body language is the research says up to 90% of your message is conveyed by what people see. as opposed to what you are saying. So you've done a presentation, you've prepped, and you've gone through that presentation 6 or 7 times, and you're comfortable about your verbal presentation. But what about your body language? Did you practice that? We're going to go on a speed tour of the 5 body language broadcast centers and learn about them. In the order of importance, it's the face, the legs and the feet, the arms, the torso, and the hands. Next. So we'll start at the most important. The face is an encyclopedia. If you have one place to look to try and figure out what's happening, you go to the face. There are at least 9 different things you are looking at in the face to read body language. If we start at the eyes, not only do you have your eyes, you have your eyelids and your eyebrows. Some of you may have encountered the raised eyebrow look when something isn't going quite right. You know exactly what the message is. So we move down from the eyes to the nose and the forehead. The forehead has the displays a number of wrinkle sites, and they are really helpful. The typical one is people think about a furrowed brow if you're thinking about something. There are other ways your um, forehead gets involved. When you smile, your forehead is part of the whole process. Your nose, you probably don't think about your nose except during allergy season, but the nose also has a front and center uh, require a front and center part in body language. There are some people whose nostrils flare when they're upset, and they cannot control it. So you're looking at that. Now we go down to the lips and the mouth, and actually the teeth. So there are lots of stuff going on there. The woman in the photo has a half smile. You're not seeing her teeth, and you're not, what you're seeing is the beginning of a real smile. But when you look at the lips and the mouth, it tells you volumes about what's going on. If the lips are pursed together, you know that the person is concerned, or this is not the direction they want things going in. If the mouth is wide open and there's a lot of noise coming out of it, you know that that's not so good either. And then you have your ears and your head. Can you guess what people see in the ears? Do you have a friend whose ears turn bright red when they're embarrassed or scared or something? That's a really good body language thing to look at. And the full head, is the person's head straight between their shoulders? Are they, is their body together? Because it all comes together in the face. And I will make one side statement. This presentation does not take into account all of the ways differently abled folks use body language and change it to make sure that they have a good way to communicate. So you need to not apply the rules of the generic business body language to somebody who comes into the picture with a different ability. That's just sort of, please take note on that. So our face just has so much information to show us. Next.
Barbara, if you don't mind, I just want to jump in with a question, kind of piggybacking off of when you said if somebody's differently able, some of these general guidelines may not apply. What about if somebody comes from, say, a different culture, where outside of American culture, there may be certain expressions or certain things people do that give messages that we're going to interpret differently and not understand what they're trying to say because we're not immersed in their cultures, they're not in ours.
Exactly. When I was planning the book and I was setting up my practice. I chose to stay within North American business body language because when you start trying to address each culture, they have their whole own set of body languages. One area that has taken a lot of interest in the work I'm doing are the universities who have large numbers of foreign students come over, and they're taking master's and business degrees. And what they need to do is they may have all the knowledge. We then teach them through body language how to fit into the process. Something as simple as a handshake. There's lots of stuff. We could go on and on that, but good point, Steve. Next. Okay, this is the surprise of body language. Your legs and your feet don't lie. Right now, take a look down at your feet because you'll never think about them the same again. The first example is what's going on in this photo. Somebody is clearly at the dentist, and if you notice, their feet are crossed at the ankles. 95% of folks who get into a dental chair immediately cross their feet, cross their legs at their ankles, and they are locked into position. That body language expression is that the crossed ankles are repressed fear. So you're in the dentist chair, you don't really want to be there, you need to be there, you want it done as quickly as possible, you're afraid it's going to hurt. So that is what the woman's crossed ankles mean. I've asked my dentist, what does he look at when somebody gets in the chair? And he said, are their legs crossed? And I said, what do you do then? He says, I try to speak with them so I can get them to relax. To all you dentists out there, I'd be interested in your tricks on that body language. There, next, sorry. So there is a lot of communication going on in these three groups. The basic thing we're going to look at is look at your feet to see what's going on in the situation. If Steve and I were in a conversation and my feet weren't pointed, and I was standing up, and my feet weren't pointed directly at Steve, Steve can take from that the fact that I have left our conversation. So if you're trying to convince somebody to do something and you've been building up to your big ask and you notice their feet are pointed 45 degrees away from you, wrap up the presentation. It's not going to work. In triads, what you see is feet generally point toward the person who is the most important. The most obvious one here is photograph 3. Clearly, the gentleman in the suit is the one who is the focus, and both of the women have their feet pointed fairly directly at him. That, if you are, remember that we used to network in big conference rooms. If you go back into that and you're in a situation where you may not know everybody and you want to know who's the most important person in the room, look for the largest number of people around them and watch their feet. That's the conversation you want to become involved in. Your feet know the answer, so trust them. Next.
And it's funny, after the first time that we ran through this program, I found it really is true. You don't think about your feet in the same way again. And so I'd be having a conversation with somebody and I'd be thinking, I'm into it, and but where are my feet pointing? And make sure that it was consistent and that I was giving the right message off, that that I was into the conversation, or if that I wanted to leave, that I wasn't so super obvious and pointing in the wrong direction.
True. So that's legs and feet. Now we go to arms. We're talking about arms from your shoulder um, down to the down to the wrist. So we have 3 photos here. In photo 1 and photo 2, both of the individuals have their arms crossed akimbo. but it's pretty obvious that the woman in the green tank top is not happy. That is I'm closing myself off, and this is not good. The woman in the second photo could be cold. She could be in Binghamton in the winter, or in Arizona in the summer when they air condition the heck out of everything. So both of those women are standing in the same posture, but you take environmental cues from the rest of it and see what's happening. The woman in the middle is fairly relaxed. The woman on the left is not. And then we come to the third photograph. Somebody is standing with their hands behind their back, and they're clasping their hands together. You're seeing the front of the individual. What is the message? Well, there can be two very opposing messages here. The first, that usually is the true one, is this person is hiding something from you. They may not be hiding something physical. They may not just be giving you all the information in the conversation, or not truthful information in the conversation. And it is subconscious. The person says, I'm not going to put my hands behind my back and hide from them. That's what happens. Can you guess the second interpretation? That one is the person is currently in the military or served in the military and has learned that this is a relaxed and comfortable position. So please don't make the decision about what somebody is telling you in their body language from one action. I would then look at the gentleman's face to see if it was relaxed and in a friendly mode, rather than pretty tight and truly hiding from something. So arms are a fairly complex one, but you see it a lot because in the world of pandemic, we only knew our anybody in the business world from the waist up. So make sure you're watching those arms. Next. I want to make sure this is a broad presentation. So we have some fashion tips coming up. Next. If you're going to stand with your hands akimbo on your hips, you have to be wearing a cape to get away standing like that. Both Superwoman and Superman look pretty okay and pretty good in their capes and their arms like that. Very powerful pose. But if you're standing there in a white shirt and black pants or gray pants, this isn't as powerful of a thing. So remember, arms akimbo means you have to have a cape. Next, Steve. And your torso is your secret strength. You go into battle daily. It isn't the same as the picture on the right, which is the person in full body armor, but that was how they knew to protect themselves. So how do you protect your torso? What armor do you wear? If you were watching somebody walk into a conference room and this conference called for wearing a suit, the the individual would the man would be walking into the room and buttoning his suit jacket, so getting his armor ready and adjusting his tie. That is making sure you're protecting yourself. A woman will look at her watch and adjust any jewelry. So psychologically, they're saying, okay, let me get ready to go into battle. It is harder and harder for me to find good photo examples of this because people are not dressing that way anymore. But you can, depending on what's going on, people wear their badges. There are lots of ways we psychologically protect our torso, which is all our vital organs. So, next. Okay, we've gone from fashion and we'd like a little bit of an art lesson about your torso. David, standing there by Michelangelo, looks pretty good. Uh, in person, it's even more overwhelming. And the fig leaf is appropriate because he's in a public space. But next, Steve, next, covering your parts with your hands does not send a powerful body language message. What it says is basically, I'm hiding something and I am not being forthright in what's going there. Unfortunately, business photographers might say, stand like that because then they have everybody, quote, looking the same. But if you can, do not stand like that in any photograph. Stand with your arms at your sides, unless you truly are worried about protecting yourself there. So, a little bit of art and fashion together. Steve? If when I was growing up, I had to learn how to speak to my parents' friends, and had to learn how to shake hands properly. Today, very, very few preteens, teens, and even younger folks understand how to shake hands properly. And it may not be what is happening in their small subculture, but at some point, as they interact with the business or academic world, they're going to need to know how to shake hands properly. Think about if you've ever received a fish handshake, a very, very limp handshake, or the knuckle crusher handshake. There's one way to do this. You stand facing the other individual. Your hands are about waist height. Your thumb is perpendicular to the floor, so it's sticking straight up. You extend your right hand. You grasp it firmly but not crushing, and you go 1, 2, 3, and pull back. That is a proper handshake. Um, you've everyone has seen in the movies or on TV some elaborate elbow bumping, all sorts of kind of stuff, not a proper handshake. Although going back to your question, Steve, I have a friend who spent 2 years in an iron lung with polio, and she's an amazing woman. But her right arm doesn't, she can't lift it. She has very poor mobility in it. Well, she shakes hands with her left hand, and that stops everybody in their tracks because they don't know what that means. And she has to explain. So that's a just a very simple example about how a small change can really affect a body language message that is pretty common. So thank you.
And the left hand handshakes can be very problematic because of what that's typically associated with in other countries. So
Yes,
you can imagine that left hand coming out and people don't react well to it. I was just
right.
thinking back about the knuckle crusher handshake as you describe it. Why do you think people do that? Are they just trying too hard, or are they trying to assert some type of dominance over the other person? I'm just kind of curious.
It's dominance, and most of the time, those people will be the person who initiates the handshake. Um, there's an etiquette potentially for who puts out their hand first, the same as in introductions. But somebody who's going to do a knuckle crusher, pound your shoulders, tends to initiate that. So get your hand out there first. You'll shake hands properly, and you'll be out of this situation. Um,
So I'll put my email address up on the screen. I just got it's more of a, I guess, a comment than a question that just came.
okay.
Here it is. I think handshakes are out with COVID. I'm fist bumping.
That's true. COVID caused a tsunami of changes in the body language. I am seeing some handshaking starting. It was really interesting to watch people when they were seeing each other, but at a social distancing, and they did not know how to greet each other. But fist bumping is, if it is not a 12-minute process, is an appropriate way. A number of people I know just go like this. So it's really individual, but good point. Thank you. So let's talk about Walt Disney. Walt Disney was a very savvy individual, and he was a body language expert. If you were to go to one of his many theme parks and you asked one of the many cast members for directions, they would say, they might say, "Where is a restroom?" The individual would take two fingers and sweep it in the direction of the restroom, because Walt Disney said you can point at a thing, the wastebasket, but you never point at a person. So you do a two-fingered sweep. The other history on that is they said he used the two-finger sweep because he always had a cigarette between his two fingers. So, but it is something that is much more gracious, and I don't personally like to be on the other end of that pointing finger, because most of the time it isn't a congratulatory message. So it's interesting how we get body language um, gestures into our culture. This was adopted, and if you'll see more and more, if you watch um, school children and a teacher, they will really work at recognizing the individual as an individual as opposed to pointing. Next, Steve. So steepling hands. During the time that Angela Merkel was in power, this was one of her favorite gestures, and it would either be at her waist or higher. There was a news magazine one week that did a composite photo of, in the space of 8 days, they photographed her doing this 35 times. And I believe it was in one of the negotiation times. What steepling the hands does, it's a subtle gesture. It establishes you as an expert. So you can think that Angela Merkel was trying to do this to say, listen to what I'm saying about a trade agreement or whatever, because this is to your best. The gentleman on the left could be trying to help you make the decision on which car to buy. There's all sorts of stuff. But if you notice, people will steeple their hands and come out looking as an expert. Next, Steve. Actually, yeah, this is fine. I want to tell a story that illustrates most of what we've been talking about so far. Um, I was asked to work with a plumbing company, fairly new company, had about 15 folks in it. And my job was to make sure that when they went out on a job, they represented the image of their company. So we spent some time together. A bunch of it was the physical, like the visit to the client began as soon as the truck got into the driveway. So they were to be ready for the stage then. Baseball hats were standard then. You could never wear your baseball hat pointing back. And we always we spoke about the fact that when you're going as a into a home as a plumber, it typically means things are bad. And they started asking about, how do you interact with the individual? They said, if it's somebody and they're sitting there crying because I've just told them it's an $8,000 job, what do you do? And I said, well, what have you done so far? And he says, stood there like an idiot. So we asked them to take a step back, steeple their hands, and very quietly begin to have the discussion. In the space of a year, this plumbing company went from a photo shoot where everybody was doing their different with their arms, and did not look like a very together and professional company, to one where they had 45 individuals, and this picture was precise. It looked more like a baseball team, but that was fine because what we wanted was a consistent image, because they were all about consistent service. And what it was about their hands, it was about their shoulders, it's about everything. So in hands palms up versus hands palms down, that's not so often found in a one-on-one conversation. It's more of a public or a broadcast situation. In general, if you are there with your palms up, or if you are sticking your hands straight in the air, I'm trying to get onto this, Steve. In surrender, your palms are facing forward. This comes from the I am not armed, I am safe. But with the arms outstretched and the palms up, it's welcoming, it's coming with me, we're in this together. If you going back and watch a lot of Steve Jobs video, that's a very, very, very common posture for him. On the right, this is somebody whose hands are closed. What he's basically saying is, listen to me, I got the answer, not interested particularly in what your answer is. Now, I am not saying that I can tell you what they were saying and what their views were. I was just using these as an example of where you put your hands in when you're talking has a big effect on your body language message. Next. We could not do this presentation without paying homage to our life over the last 15 to 16 months in virtual meetings. And the thing that I was thinking about was, do you realize that somewhere a baby is going to say Zoom as their first word? It's a real different change in our lives. When you are in virtual meetings, everything we've talked about is magnified. Now, granted, most of the times it's from the waist up, but they can't see the rest of you. And most of the time, you're not always talking. So they are forming much of their viewpoint on your credibility, your likability, whether or not they agree with you, from what is on a Zoom or a GoToMeeting screen. So how do you deal with it? You make sure that your work surface is relatively clear. Everything around you is clear. It gives the ability to focus on you. It also it sets the stage for how you want to be seen. I want to be seen as a person in an office that has a lot of stuff going on, but it's neat and tidy. How do you make sure you're attentive and alert? The first thing I always say is never go no camera. That's bad form because everybody else is on camera. You make sure that you are in the picture, centered, that the focus is on your face, and you have a pleasant, if not a smile on your face. The other thing is you are going to be moving. You're not a mannequin. So what you want to do is make sure that you don't go into a trance where people don't know if you're there or not there. Somebody is always scanning in a virtual meeting to see who's involved, who isn't involved. And I know you all have horrible stories about what they've heard and what happened when somebody forgot they were still on camera. My question for you really is, are you going to continue to hold as many virtual meetings once the office reopens? Steve, what about you?
I was just thinking through this whole thing that I find the most uncomfortable part of doing things on Zoom are the one-on-one Zoom calls where I feel like I don't know where to look. Should I look at the camera or should I look at the person? The eye contact is impossible. So that
Yeah.
to me is just like I'd rather have 20 squares to look at and just look at the camera because I know I can't engage with any one person and can't engage everyone and treat it like I'm hosting the webinar versus the one-on-one where it looks like you say, well, what is he looking at? And I when the other person's talking, I look at them, but it's the same dynamic for that person as well.
It's difficult, I would say, in general, because it's such a quickly changing environment. I tend to tell people just look at the camera, they'll know where to find you. And it isn't an impolite view. If they can hear you on your keyboard, that's not good. So that means you're not engaged in the process. Um, so you are always on camera. Is there any wisdom you've come up with that makes sense about virtual meetings? We'd be happy to have you share them.
I would definitely agree about it not being a good look because it's had meetings, not here at the university, so don't anybody get the wrong idea. But in other things I've been involved in where I'm one of the few people on camera and you have people on the paid staff that are not on camera and you just wonder why not? What is it that you don't want me to see? Or are they trying to get grocery shopping done? Or are they driving the car or doing something else? And so that doesn't really come off well. And just also thinking about pets in Zoom calls after March 20th of 2020, that probably stopped being fun and original and just say, okay, keep the dogs and cats out. Like the
Yeah,
first time was okay, and you got cats running all over you. That's probably not the image you want to send. So
yeah.
yeah.
It's I do a lot of interviewing to bring on CEOs and top level folks, and that's really hard to do on Zoom or an online situation. But we've had to adjust to it. Um, it is difficult. What I would say is, while you're in a meeting, think about all of those other people, and if you were in a face-to-face meeting with them, would you be doing the same thing you're about ready to be doing now? And then I want you to raise your hand. How many of you had Zoom outfits to go to work in? Nice professional top, maybe sweatpants, maybe shorts. We all did. People are having to really rethink how they dress and what they're doing, um, now that we're stopping virtual meetings. I think that certain types of positions are more readily going to stay with virtual, but there are some situations where people are going to go back to face to face. If you have a choice, the first time you meet somebody, do it in person, and then it makes the transition into online much easier. So the when you're sitting there, I want you smiling, and if possible, have a mirror you're smiling into so you can see yourself. It's a good feedback role. Um, so
How do you feel about those background images? Because depending on how it's set up, I mean, they can sort of glitch out after a while, and it just looks very, very obviously fake, and maybe doesn't send the best impression unless their real background is so messy that we really don't want to see it.
I try to advise people not to do a background, but you're right. If they are in the midst of the playroom in their home where their kids have every toy out, a background, the simpler, the better. Um, I think the one I've seen most consistently is the swaying palms at the beach. We all know you aren't there, but it does make us all jealous. So if like Steve, you have a Binghamton background behind you, that one works relatively well. But is that physical or is that a a
That's
backdrop?
physical, so that's actually a cloth pull-up banner, like a
Yeah,
media backdrop. So it tends to work well because I don't glitch out. But yeah, the swaying palms you see a lot. Or what about somebody taking the Zoom call outside? Now we're getting into the winter, so in New York and or the Midwest or Northeast, that's not going to be something you really want to do. Arizona probably get away with a little bit more. Florida, but does that look a little bit too casual for a business Zoom meeting that I'm outside on my back deck and you start to wonder, do they have a cocktail off camera or something like
yeah.
that?
Um, I'm taking some classes and I do them outside because the weather is finally good, but I do not do transactional business meetings outside. Because right, it's the question about, well, what else is going on here? We are pretty sure, Steve, that you do not have a cocktail off camera here.
I do not. So I had a cup of coffee
Oh,
and now it's done. So I'll probably get another one after the show is over. But I'm in no hurry to wrap up for that. So we've got let's say about 20 minutes left. Do keep the questions coming, and so I'll put my email address up on the screen. So it's been great to get questions or comments on things you're wondering about, things that have worked or not worked in Zoom meetings you've been part of. And yes, we've all seen and heard the stories of things that are not really polite to talk about, but they came up in the Zoom meeting whether you're ready for them or not, and they certainly made it memorable for
that's
the
right.
wrong reason.
So with body language, the my goal in discussing body language with you, and when I do a body language tune up with somebody, is to get what they're saying and what their body is doing to be congruent. Because in any situation, if you're saying one thing and your body is saying another thing, people will go to the make the decision based on what the body is saying. So you can be trying to sell somebody, but your head may be going like this. That's not really good. So think about it. If you have the opportunity to video yourself in a meeting that is really transactional, it's really good to take a look at it afterward because you will find some body language gestures that help you and you will find some that hinder you. My default body language gesture is if you're standing up, you let your arms rest naturally at your side. It doesn't feel comfortable the first couple of times you do it, but that's how we're built. At rest is your body, are your arms resting at your side. Because if you cross them, that's one thing. If you're like this, people think, what am I saying? There's what you want to do is when you're listening or before a meeting starts, you want to be in a neutral posture. So Steve has done a really good job in that he is leaning slightly forward. His shoulders are relaxed, but his eyes are on the camera saying, I'm interested in this. Versus, I mean, Steve, start looking the other way. Yeah, I'm trying to figure out, is Steve here or not? So I will check him off as attending, but I will not check him off as being involved. So,
I looked in the wrong direction because this way is out the window and the sun
uh-oh,
was bouncing off somebody's car window. So I should have looked the other way because that was not pleasant to see. Looks like, oh, we do have a question. So
sure.
what does it say if you have to move your hands when talking? Is it helpful or harmful with teaching?
Great question. Um, if you're from New York, the East Coast, yeah, you move your hands all the time. Um, if your hand motions are emphasizing as opposed to just the going back and forth, they're okay. The other thing is you have to remember who it is you're communicating with. If they would do that in their conversation, it's okay. I mean, you don't want people in a major cheerleading situation or a protest situation, but it's okay to move your hands. You have to just take a look periodically. Are you distracting from the message?
I have a comment that just came in by email. I'll read here off the screen. I've been instructed in many meetings to keep the camera and mic off unless you are speaking in an effort to keep the focus on the speaker. However, I agree that in most cases it is proper business etiquette to keep them on so you're engaged in the meeting. So very situation specific, as many things can be
Yeah.
sometimes.
Um, Keeping your volume on mute when you're not speaking is a good idea because who knows if the dog and cat aren't going to get into a huge fight, or if somebody's not going to run through yelling and screaming. Or we live near Luke Air Force Base, and you will occasionally get fairly low altitude fighters coming over, which is fairly noisy. So what it does is it puts you in a I'm ready to hear posture. Uh, I personally do not like if you turn off your camera, because then I am talking to nothing. With the camera on, I still can gauge some body language. When Steve and I started to plan this, one of the things I said is, "You mean I'm not going to be able to see these people?" And he said, "No." I said, "All right, I'll just imagine." But I can't tell. I can't read the body language. Are you bored? Or do you want more on this topic? What's going on? And as I was just watching myself, I move my hands a lot. So I guess it's each person's viewpoint on that. Steve, anything else?
Did we have any slides after that? I don't want to change it
Yeah,
if we're on the last one. I
yeah.
think we did. So I'll bring that back up and then we'll keep rolling. So that's it on the questions so far, but do keep them coming.
Okay. What we've just spent the last 45 minutes talking about is self-awareness. If you are self-aware, you're congruent in what you say and what your body is doing, because you want to be clear in your conversation and clear in your message. It's one thing that we can help children with, because they don't connect body language and speech. So you need to sort of model that for them. If you are working with or mentoring somebody outside of the North American business culture, you once again have to help them get a self-awareness of the business body language that occurs in business in Mexico, the United States, and Canada. So it's a while you're doing all of this, you really have to be thinking about, am I including everyone that I can in the process? Next. So here's a quick summary on how to be a body language pro. If you walk out of here and begin to implement even 3 or 4 of these things, you will become more effective. Keeping a neutral facial expression when listening. What that says to the individual is, I'm taking it in, I'm taking it in. When I work with college students, one of the things that young females tend to do is, if they're in a conversation, they keep nodding their head up and down. And what they're saying is, I hear you, continue. What the person who is talking may be seeing, if it's somebody asking for a date or something else, they're saying, she's agreeing, I can go along with it. So you have one person thinks there's agreement, and one person's thinking that this is just the way to keep the conversation going. A genuine smile is not full teeth, And when you do it, sorry to say, you get crinkles at the edges of your eyes and in between your eyes and by your eyebrows. What you want to see is some teeth, not sort of a not wide mouth, but sort of a half smile. And that will be, you can differentiate between that and when people say smile into a camera, that's not a genuine smile. Perhaps my favorite one is point your feet directly into the conversation. And then, if you're comfortable, use your signature handshake or a way that you have um, determined is an appropriate meeting way. If you want to just add a little bit of additional luck to it, steeple your hand so that message that you're the expert goes out. Use your palms up whenever you speak. Take Think about that and see if you're a palms up, palms down person, because you really want to change to palms up. We want you to point with one finger at things, and at people you use the two-finger Disney sweep. And whenever you're in a photograph or just in a stand-up meeting, keep your arms at your side. No fig leaf stances at all. Next. So I have a book coming out in mid 2022. Both it has two different approaches. The first part is what we've done today. It's gone about explaining what your feet do, what your face can do. The second part gets into the situations that we've been discussing here. What's a business? How do you use body language in this situation? What happens if you are getting ready to travel? So please sign up at the website both for a copy of these slides and information on when the book is published. So Steve, do we have any more questions?
So I will put my email address back up on the screen. And as we wait for questions, I have one or two of my own. So go ahead and ask. So normally your presentations that you give are not done this way. That they're in person, and that's the best way to get a lot of these messages across. But we certainly appreciate you adapting the content to fit with this and to be inclusive of alumni everywhere who can watch. But I'm just curious, when you have these presentations in person, what's the number one question that you find that the attendees will ask you?
If it is a senior level group, they're going to say, well, what's the most important? There's so many different body language things. What do I need to focus on? And I say two things. Focus on your face. If your face isn't engaged, none of that message can come through. And then look at your feet. If you are if you get yourself into situations where you're standing and talking to somebody, make sure that your feet are as much in the meeting as you can be. With entry level employees, the questions are fun because they're saying, well, can I do this? Can I, is it okay to eat in a meeting? Well, that isn't necessarily body language. It's sort of professionalism. So we try to start closing in on a more professional set of actions around it. And you can see immediately when younger employees are listening, they will take it in and then they will watch the people around them in the workplace. So if your body language isn't good in the workplace, what you're teaching those employees is bad body language. So remember that.
I'll share one comment I just got by email. Thank you so much for this informative presentation. And I'm sure there are many others who feel the same way about it. One thing I was thinking of is, what about, sort of, I'll call it accessorizing. So I give a real story. The other day I went to a meeting and I was carrying a briefcase. And so my wife says, "Why do you need that? Do you really need all the papers and the books and whatever that's in it?" I said, "Well, I wanted to hold it. I felt like it made me look more professional because I wanted to present a good image going to the meeting. But then also turned out we actually did need the stuff that I had in there, so it was useful. Um, but think about people who carry, portfolios or just different things, or like clipboards, or maybe they just don't know what to do with their hands. It gives them something to do. Does that enhance their look, or is it obvious they just are like the thing is just there as a decoration?
You can't go wrong with a yellow pad or um, a neutral portfolio. You're not advertising a rock group or something like that. Um, the the goal is to practice and be able to be comfortable with things not being in your hands. Something that you will see a lot of people is they can't speak without a pen or a pencil in their hands. And it really takes the power away from them. You're focusing on the pen or pencil. You're not focusing on what they say. So if you come in with a briefcase that has stuff sticking out of it, the handle is broken, that's not good. If you have a portfolio, I think you can't go wrong. And if I don't write it down, it doesn't get remembered. So I always have something to write on.
As you were talking about something earlier in the presentation, the idea just came back to me, so I'm glad I thought of it. Is that a common situation that I could think of is a negotiation? Say you're sitting across the table from someone and you're talking about buying a car, and trying to get the best price. And there's a dance around that of not only so much making an offer or just trying to, seem like you're not as interested, and trying to leverage a situation a certain way. Like, what cues should we be looking for, and trying to read in somebody in a situation where, we're trying to get the most leverage out of a situation as we can, as they're presumably trying to do the same thing.
Right. I always recommend for folks that they keep a neutral face while they're listening. If you are on the other side of a car salesman, you can turn that face into a little bit firmer face. Um, you don't want them to think that you are taking everything in and everything. What they're saying makes all the sense in the world. It also is steepling your hands and coming into their space. If you're across the desk, coming in and putting your arms on the table and saying, look, I don't want all this nonsense. Let's get to the final price. You know, um, and if it really gets bad, you stand up and say, I'm out of here. Because your feet have been out of the conversation for a while. You might as well join them.
I had one where I walked out and I really wanted the deal, but I didn't want them to feel like they easily hooked me because they threw a great price. I'm like, man, that's great. But I didn't want to make it seem like, they
Okay,
they
you
had
know, yeah.
easily won me over. I'm like, let's make them sweat it out a little bit. So an hour later, I called them back, and we made the deal. It probably wasn't very nice. So, but it
I
seemed like a
mean,
good idea at the time.
they're in a shark tank, you know. That's why people don't stay in car sales too long. But yeah, you have to. So if you're going in for a doctor's appointment, what kind of face, what kind of countenance and body language do you have? I try not to fidget. I try to lean forward into the discussion so the doctor knows that I'm interested in listening. So every time you do something, if you go to 7-Eleven and you're paying for your gas, that's a body language interaction and you're giving a specific message. So make sure that you're in control of that.
I have a question from a class of 1972 classmate. It just came by email. It says,
Hi,
with the requirement of mask wearing in business settings and other settings, how do we compensate with facial body language? What a great question.
good one. The best response I've seen to it is in a very specialty medical setting. The docs wore all the facial stuff, and then they put in a 8 by 8.5 by 11 sheet protector a picture of themselves of who they were, and it was written below, "This is who I really am." So what they were doing in that situation was bringing their humanity into a situation that you really is not that human. So that was a good one. The other thing is your body language becomes the way they're going to make a decision about what's going on. Because most of the times you're standing, you're not walking, so you don't have a lot of arm movements, but it is your face. And the problem is if you're wearing glasses and wearing a mask, it's very, very hard to do that. When I cross the border here, the what they always say is pull down your mask because they want a photo for the facial recognition system, and it doesn't deal with masks. So um, people have gotten creative. You have to stay within um, the regulations and the protocol it's set up. But I do think it's a great idea to try to bring some of your humanity into it. I will wear a nice bracelet that's interesting. So something that will make me slightly different from the rest of the folks.
Yeah, it can be very strange with masks, and I find for me it's a little bit uncomfortable because all I can see are the eyes, and I feel like I key in on that in a way that's almost too intense, and especially if it's say an eye color I like, for instance, it's just like it magnifies that effect even more, and it's very uncomfortable for me because I feel like I'm just too locked in on that as I don't have the whole face to look at.
Right, but watch their eyes. It'll be the same thing. I mean, looking at a mask doesn't give you a lot of information, um, nor is it interesting. So your sight will wander on that. Um,
We're just about at the top of the hour, a little bit after. So there's one question from somebody that came in a little bit late, asking if you can just give a quick explainer on the two-finger Disney sweep, since they missed that.
okay, Disney said you can point at a thing, but you cannot point at a person. So if I say, bring that box over here, that's a box you're pointing at. If you're saying, Eleanor, can you please help Gerald? And what you're doing is you're taking two fingers, and it's not a direct arrow, it's a sweep to that individual. And it's always a gentle two fingers. So what it's saying is, may I introduce you to, or here's how you get your help. I hope that answers your question.
I think that was good. So we're just about out of time, and I want to say, Barbara, thank you very much for today's presentation. And this was really a lot of fun to put together and a lot of fun to deliver, a fast hour like always. And so I hope everybody enjoyed the program and really felt that they got something out of it. And I hope it was a great experience for you. And I know you have a lot of passion to talk about these different issues that we covered over the past hour. So thank you. We appreciate it very much.
Well, a shout out to a fellow 1972 graduate. There are fewer of us hanging around. It's great. And also, please request the slides because it gives you a reference to go back to. And if you have any questions, I'd always be willing to answer them, and please too. So have a good rest of the day, Steve. Thanks so much.
Barbara, thank you so much, and we will put on the microsite a link to the slides, so you can take a look at those at your leisure. This will be up on the microsite, archived, so you can take a look at your own convenience. Just as we record everything, this is being recorded and will be available to watch as many times as you'd like to take a look at it. So we will be back a week from today, November 17th at noon Eastern, to look at Home Buying 101. Certainly. This will be a topic of high interest to a lot of people, especially with all the dynamics going on in today's real estate market. So if you're in the market for your first home or you expect that you're going to be soon, this program will be for you. Home Buying 101 coming up Wednesday, November 17th at noon Eastern. So from all of us here at Binghamton University, have a great rest of the day, and we'll see you next time here on the Binghamton Learning Network.